So let me show you the CrowdCovid application. I promise you, it's going to be great. Why is it going to be great? Because it's very realistic, based on the typical startup experience. The code is hacky. It's kind of broken. I didn't care much about deployment. The test coverage is catastrophic, and at some stage I just abandoned it. So I think it's a perfect example project to do medical device documentation, because that's not very far from the situation of a typical startup in this space. Also, the documentation we'll be doing is retrospectively, which may be like the worst nightmare of each regulatory affairs consultant, of any regulatory affairs consultant. But that's the way things typically are. Startups typically start out developing some software, and only later do they notice that it's a medical device. So that's what we're doing. Also, I think learning by example is much better than just learning in an abstract way. So I'm not going to tell you what you have to do in theory to document it, but I'm actually documenting it while you watch me. So I think this is hopefully the best way of actually showing you how to do this stuff. So you can hopefully do it in the future and never need me as a consultant, and I can go off and do other things with my life. So let's dive right into the application and just have a look what this stuff is about. So it's called CrowdCovid. It was actually live at the beginning of this year, around like February, March 2020, I think. It was online on crowdcovid.com. It no longer is, because I just didn't bother and stopped like paying for the Heroku thing, which has the custom domain included. So the basic idea was, at the time COVID just started, and it was the whole system of testing people was extremely broken. So you would sometimes get a test, it would be very difficult, I mean a COVID test, and then oftentimes it would take very long for the result to appear, and then it would take even longer for the results to actually be registered at the official registries. So this software was basically trying to fix that problem by letting people report their symptoms in real time. So obviously it's not a clear test whether you're positive or not, but you can say like, hey, I have a cough, and then you see how many people in your neighborhood also have a cough. So that's the basic idea. Right now this is running on my local machine again, as I said, as I stopped paying Heroku. But it's still running, which is really good, which I guess happens if you don't choose JavaScript as your language. Then code tends to actually still run a few months later. So let's see, you launch it, and then you have this cool map. By the way, this is simulated data, so I just generated it to have something to show you. You have this cool map, which is the Mapbox API, and you can like zoom in and out by scrolling, and you can see like cool. They are like that. You have this heat map thing where like you have a green areas and like red areas and like yellow for in between, and then you have these dots, and these dots are people who submitted data. So you can click on a dot and see like, hey, green is a healthy person. They don't have fever, they don't have a cough, and they were tested. And if people were tested, the dots actually have this white border. If they're not tested, so if it's just like subjective reported data, then there's no border. So you see like, here's a sick person. No fever, no cough. Oh, by the way, you can classify yourself as sick even though you don't have a fever and don't have a cough. So assuming that you could have other symptoms which were associated with COVID, maybe like diarrhea or whatever. So yeah, this is a sick person, not tested, and this is like a sick person who is actually tested. It also like anonymizes locations, so it doesn't pinpoint, if you submit data, it doesn't pinpoint your location to the exact spot, because that would kind of probably be a bit of a data privacy problem, because then you could actually like, if you would live in a small village like I did when I was young, which sucked, then you could actually pinpoint stuff to specific houses based on the accuracy of the device people are reporting stuff from. So that would be not very cool. So you could see like, hey, my neighbor actually has COVID, but he didn't want to tell me, but he submitted it to this site, and now I know it. So that's not happening. That's why it says like, location is anonymized within 2 kilometers, which basically just means if you submit a location, it draws like a virtual box which has like a length of 2 kilometers around it, and it just randomly places that dot somewhere in that box. So, so your dot will appear somewhere, but within 2 kilometers of your actual location. So please don't kill me if this has some sort of algorithmic data privacy problems. For me, this is anonymous enough. So yeah, and then you can actually submit data. So there is no mobile app. This is all there is. So I can also submit data from here. So I can say like, hey, how does it work? Yeah, blah, blah, blah. We want to track data faster. And you can contribute by submitting data. So you can say like, hey, I'm healthy, I'm sick. Let's say, okay, I'm healthy. Then it asks you something based on this. So if you're healthy, there aren't many other questions. You could like say, well, the only other question is like, you've actually done a test which has confirmed that you're healthy, or at least COVID negative. So let's say, well, actually I didn't do a test, so let's leave this. Let's not actually check this. Now submit, and then that's it. So then my dot should have appeared somewhere in Berlin. Yeah, because I'm also simulating a ton of data in Berlin, I don't know where my dot is now. So maybe that could be a feature for the future. Okay, and then you have like some nice things, like you can actually, if you're on your mobile phone, you can click on this WhatsApp button and it sends a WhatsApp to your friends to say like, hey, check out this site, please submit data too. Same for Telegram, same for Twitter. And the cool thing is you can actually like click on activate push notifications. Actually, this is not super useful, except that it annoys you every 24 hours to say like, hey, enter more data now. Because I didn't really know how to make people come back to this site without annoying them via push notifications, because otherwise they would visit once, submit once, and never come back. And that's not cool, because you would actually want to track the same people over time, because otherwise you're just getting, I guess, random data from various people. So yeah, that's the idea. Let me briefly show it to you how it actually looks if you click sick. So I just reloaded this page. By the way, it also doesn't load that fast. Okay, so here we are. Click I'm sick. And then you see the questionnaire is a bit different. So you can say I have fever, I have a cough. You can even enter additional symptoms like, I don't know, headache. And yeah, I've done a test. Let's just say I've got all the stuff here. So submit it. Okay, so same screen in the end. That's pretty much it. And you're pretty much good to go. You can also hide it, but yeah, it's not like a killer feature. Yeah, so that's what the CrowdCovid application is all about. I hope you kind of understood it mostly. The source is actually up on GitHub. If you search my GitHub, or you just continue watching the screencast and look at this link, then you will see you will see what the source is. So it's my report. It's my GitHub nickname, and Corona Tracker is the word project name for it. But yeah, you don't really have to check it out right now. It's only if you're like really deeply interested in how to build a COVID tracker with a Mapbox API with Hacky code. All right, so finally, maybe a final thing is like, why is this a medical device? I have to confess, I don't think this would actually be a medical device per the MDD or MDR definition, because we're literally just tracking, I guess, like statistical data on COVID symptom occurrences across, well, the world on a map. And if you go back to the MDD and MDR definitions of a medical device, you will notice we probably don't fulfill any of that. So we're not like directly diagnosing a disease or like somehow helping in the treatment or doing like disease prevention. So it's kind of like, it's kind of very different from an app which like say gives you a direct diagnosis or another app or a software which a radiologist uses in a hospital to actually look at X-ray images to make a diagnosis, for example. So this is more of a, I guess, like crowdsourcing data tool. But for the sake of this example, let's just assume that this is a medical device, because otherwise I have nothing to show you. And we could even say, okay, if for example, this is kind of like constructed, but if you would say it had this feature that after you submit data, it tells you like, yes, you have COVID, or no, you don't have COVID. So it actually makes that diagnosis. That would probably put it somewhere in the area of being a medical device. So if we assume it had this feature, we would be one, and we would be happy to move along with documenting it. Cool. So I hope you understood it, and I think you probably have enough knowledge to now follow along when I actually start writing documentation for this.